Hi all, welcome to the PHLpreK contracts training for FY23. We're really excited to have you here. I'm Carrie Lee, I'm the contracts manager for the PHLpreK intermediary. I'm here with my colleague, Kate Zimmich, she's the contracts coordinator. We'll be mainly leading you through this presentation today. You may hear from Leslie Rosler, our intermediary director. A couple of housekeeping items. Please have yourself muted through the presentation. You can type any questions you have in the chat box. Questions will be addressed along the way when it's possible, but we'll make sure to develop an FAQ of the questions all across the trainings this week, and we'll send that out to you. This presentation is being recorded, and slides will be included in the newsletter and will be posted on Spark's Knowledge Center. In terms of our agenda today, we'll have a welcome from the Office of Children and Families. We'll touch a little bit on PHMC as the administrative intermediary, and then talk about Spark, the Quality Support Center. The bulk of our time will be spent on contract deliverables, and then we'll round out the session with preparing for contracting and next steps. So first, let's throw it to Amy Ludwig, PHLpreK Manager of Strategy and Policy for the Office of Children and Families.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Amy, the PHLpreK Manager of Strategy and Policy. I'm going to give a brief overview of the PHLpreK program just to start things off today. We always like to start off with the pre-K mission, which is to increase access to quality early learning by offering free pre-K programs to children regardless of family income. So thank you to all the providers that are on the call today who really take this mission and make it a reality. There are four main commitments that drive PHLpreK. Increase center quality by providing instructional resources to providers, to offer resources to support healthy development of children, including developmental screenings, to support staff growth and development, and finally to provide registration and transition support for students who are moving on to kindergarten. PHLpreK is managed by the Office of Children and Families, specifically the ECE division, and from there are two organizations that provide direct support to you, the providers. The administrative intermediary is PHMC. They're an oversee of contract deliverables and accountability. And the Quality Support Center, Spark, provides quality supports and resources directly to providers. All three organizations are really here to support you, so please feel free to reach out with any questions that you might have. The contact information for each is listed below. Thanks again for having me today and for being a part of the PHLpreK program.
Thanks, Amy. Okay, so now we'll go on to talking about PHMC as the administrative intermediary. Go to the next slide. So PHMC is responsible for the oversight of the PHLpreK program. That includes the administration of contracts with providers, the flow of funds to providers, fiscal compliance and monitoring, program reporting, enrollment oversight, data collection and management and analysis, and strategic partnerships. The intermediary is really here to help you interpret, understand, and be successful in meeting your contract deliverables. So we are really the first point of contact around those deliverables, and your provider service specialist is there to help and support you. The goals of PHLpreK intermediary are to provide high quality provider services, provide accurate and timely enrollment-based payment. We make recommendations for system growth and improvement based on data. We refer system supports based on provider performance, goals, and priorities, and provide clear definition of contract expectations, and that's what we're hoping to do today. There are several ways you can contact us. There's a general inquiry email and number for all providers. We have a childcare service desk, and there's some information here. Any site-specific questions can be referred directly to your provider service specialist. And then we also have an intake line and email for families. Again, all of this information is going to be emailed to you or in the newsletter in the Spark Knowledge Support Center, so you'll have them all for reference. And so now we'll hear from Spark, the Quality Support Center, and I'll throw it to Allison Leshin, Deputy Director of Program Support.
Good morning, everybody. So nice to be here to tell you a little bit about Spark. Who are we? We are here as your support entity, right? So we do a variety of things: coaching, professional development, resources. We have a full knowledge center that has a ton of information. And, you know, we're here to support you. We are working with OCF and PHMC to make sure that you get all the support that you need. One of the things that we also want to highlight is that the coaches are ready and excited to meet you all if you've not been in PHL before. And even if you're a returning provider, you'll have a coach that you can rely on for questions, etc. And we support you in strengthening your program and building quality strategies and growing the program for you. And we deliver all kinds of strategies and supports that will be very unique to you as a program, not all one size fits all in the work that we do. We created peer networks, learning communities, and have really thought that one of the best ways you can get support is to work together with other people who are going through similar things or experiencing similar things. And there's very easy way to get in touch with us. We have a help desk, we have your coach, we have an email address, and a website. So there shouldn't be a challenge of getting in touch with us, but you know, certainly reach out. We have a chat feature on our Knowledge Center that you can instantly get support. And we really believe in empowering you to be the steerer of your improvement and your growth. So we hope that we can help you find a path forward, whatever that is, that we can be best supportive of you. Yep.
Great, thanks, Allison. So now Kate and I will take you through the contract deliverables. We'll start off with updates to deliverables. These are those we want to call out that either have a change, like a minor change, such as a due date change. They may have a more significant change, or we just want to call out because of risk. These we'll dig into a minute through the presentation, but to touch on the list, it's adhering to health and safety guidance, remote learning, staff qualifications, 21st century minimum wage and benefits, health and nutrition standards, kindergarten transition, fiscal adherence, and City of Philadelphia compliance. The following deliverables remain the same, and you should know all these. We'll just read through the list really quickly. Licensing and stars in good standing, religious affiliation and discrimination, and growth providers moving to star 3, enrollment and recruitment, eligibility conversion or aging in, average daily attendance, curriculum, outcomes assessment and developmental screening, developmental screening when ASQ for SE is needed, suspension and expulsion, family partnerships, health assessment, data management, meeting and training participation, complying with monitoring and reporting requests, invoicing and payment, and then termination. So first we'll talk about DHS compliance, licensing compliance. So you need to maintain your DHS or PDE license in good standing for your approved location. All children must be served at the approved location, and you need to notify PHMC prior to making any changes. If a provider receives a provisional license during the operating year, will continue to provide services to the children until the end of the year. Providers must notify the contract entity, which is PHMC or the school district if you're under the school district of Philadelphia, must notify the contract entity of any significant findings within 30 days, regardless of whether the findings involve a PHL pre-K funded child or classroom. And then if PHL pre-K staff see any violations when they're out at your sites, they need to report it. Your award can be rescinded or your contract voided for several reasons. If you receive a provisional license after July 1st and before your contract is issued, a negative sanction that results in the closure of your facility, any violations that result in the emergency removal of children from the facility by DHS, or misrepresentation or fraud discovered in obtaining your DHS license. So if any of these instances occur, you should notify OCF immediately, and they'll help support families in relocating to another PHL pre-K location. Providers need to self-report the DHS violations listed on this slide to Octal and to PHMC or the school district within 48 hours. These are violations like injury at a center requiring emergency room treatment or inpatient hospitalization, a death of a child receiving care at the facility, a facility fire that requires the services of the fire department, a verified incidence of child abuse or neglect, fire safety, pediatric first aid, and or water safety, and resulting in STAR suspension, violation of regulations causing child endangerment, injury, or death, or revocation or refusal to renew DHS certification of compliance. Those with religious affiliation may offer programming in accordance with their beliefs, but they cannot deny a child's enrollment based on religious affiliation. They need to let families choose to opt out of religious programming. No religious instruction should occur during that 5.5-hour PHL pre-K day. And providers should not discriminate or permit discrimination against any child, staff member, or potential employment candidate because of race, sex, ethnicity, color, sexual orientation, gender identity, religion, natural origin, ancestry, disability, marital status, familial status, or domestic or sexual violence victim status. This is a reminder that providers should continue to adhere to guidance and implement strategies to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. Strategies should be based on updated guidance from the CDC, Octal, and the City of Philadelphia. Current recommendations from Octal are to implement a child care facility COVID-19 health and safety plan, and providers are required to continue to report positive COVID-19 cases via Qualtrics and REDCap, and also inform families of suspected outbreaks. So all that is the same. Providers are expected to provide in-person learning, but in preparation for any emergency closings, including those related to COVID, all providers need to complete a remote learning waiver. These need to be approved by the Office of Children and Families prior to your program start date, and we'll provide more information in follow-up materials about how to submit those. So any requests for emergency closings, including those related to COVID, must be approved by OCF. This is a change here. Philadelphia's Department of Public Health will no longer be making decisions on closings. So providers can be virtual for one business day while waiting for a response from OCF. And we will follow up about specifics of this process, and it'll be communicated at a later date.
Okay, so most of you guys know this already. No big changes here. Current STAR 3 and 4 providers need to maintain good standing in STARs, and any growth providers have to ensure that they're using their resources to achieve STAR 3 or 4 status and complying with any deadlines that are set with their contract entity and with OCF. Also make sure that you're taking advantage of resources available to you either through the ELRC or the Quality Support Center with Spark. Enrollment recruitment, nothing different here. Make sure that you've got that enrollment recruitment plan working for you to maintain 100% enrollment with a wait list of eligible applicants in childcare. Also make sure that you're enrolling and discharging children, of course, per the enrollment provider, the PHL pre-K enrollment provider policy. And just to note that you cannot require any additional application information or fees, for example, holding a spot or an application fee in advance of enrollment in the PHL pre-K program or with in association with PHL pre-K services. I think a lot of you folks are familiar with this process, enrollment analysis. So folks must meet the enrollment targets. We're hoping that everybody gets to 50% by August 26th. I know a lot of you are working your way there now. And then 100% by September 30th. Sites that are not 100% enrolled and have seats that have been vacant for 30 days or more, they will be contacted and asked to develop a recruitment plan. If necessary, OCF will determine if and when PHL pre-K seats might need to be reallocated or reshuffled around in the system. Current enrollment and waitlist status is a consideration when reallocating slots. So make sure that if you're interested in getting a slot increase, that waitlist is up to date. If slot reallocation happens, so that reshuffling of seats in the system, PHMC will support families with PHL pre-K eligible children finding a new location if needed. Increases in slot allocations will be prioritized to sites that are star 3 or 4, that demonstrate contract compliance and good standings with Keystone stars and are meeting quality improvement benchmarks. They have 100% enrollment and have an active waitlist in childcare. Again, that 100% enrollment, active waitlist. They meet the priority areas determined by the city. And they can attest or affirm that you have the space and the staff that are ready to go, qualified staff and enough sufficient space in your classroom or in your facility to accommodate the new seats. Keep in mind that Great Philly Schools is an excellent tool, marketing tool. We know that it drives a lot, or rather parents use a lot of that, use that site often to drive their decisions in finding sites for them. And it's something that is a free service. We want you to make sure that you are updating your program information, anything from like kinds of service you offer to site information like address and telephone number. Make sure that that's updated at least twice a year. So eligibility. We might get a lot of questions about this that are kind of specific. So please make sure if you do have a question, get it in the question box, but we might not go through every single one of them today. But for eligibility, children are eligible for PHL pre-K if they are 3 or 4 years old on or by September 1st of the enrollment year and younger than the entry age for kindergarten in the school district, and they reside in Philadelphia. Children who are aging into your program are currently enrolled 2-year-olds that will be 3 by September 1st. Currently enrolled or a currently enrolled child who turned 3 after September 1st and did not participate in Head Start or pre-K counts at the PHL pre-K location they wish to enroll in. So slot conversion and supplanting. Children who are age eligible, currently in pre-K programming at the site who are being funded by alternative sources cannot be converted to PHL pre-K funding. So that goes back to what we mentioned on that first slide. If a child is getting Head Start funding for pre-K services, you cannot enroll that child the next year in PHL pre-K. You can also not convert infant and toddler slots to PHL pre-K slots and convert existing Head Start or pre-K count slots to PHL pre-K slots. The whole intent behind this is to ensure that PHL pre-K funding is used to expand the availability of funded pre-K seats in the city. So if we're just sort of trading around who is in the funded seats, it doesn't mean that there is increased availability. We all know that there's high demand for these slots. The intention here is that they have they're increasing the supply of those seats for folks who need them in the city.
Okay, so providers would need to have an attendance policy. You can refer to the handout sample policy that we'll talk about at the end of this presentation, but your policy should include clear procedures to deliver and document supports that remediate chronic and consecutive absences. You want to make sure you're documenting contact with the family about absences and then keeping that on file in childware. You want to make sure you're providing support and resources to families when absences are due to hardship. And slots will be held for 30 days for children who have an approved extended absence due to long-term illness. You should be monitoring attendance using sign-in and sign-out procedures and entering that attendance weekly into childware. You want to make sure you're keeping any supporting documentation, documenting your correspondence with families in case it's requested by compliance monitors. You should be reviewing your average daily attendance monthly, and if it falls below 85%, you want to consider questions like what challenges might the families be having, is there any pattern? That'll help you determine how you'll be able to assist families. But in the end, make sure you're just really sticking to your policy using the communication timelines and strategies you laid out within it. If a child is expected to be absent for more than 30 days or has consecutive absences approaching 30 days, providers should notify your contract entity and the administrative intermediary. You'll be asked to submit documentation of regular communication with families during that period. So, making sure you keep that is really critical. The contract entity, intermediary, and OCF will review these instances on a case-by-case basis. A determination will be made by OCF about whether the child should remain as an active enrollment or if the child should be discharged and added to the wait list. In these circumstances, the PHL Pre-K invoicing policy will still apply. Once a child is discharged, providers have 60 days to fill the seat, and failure to comply with these steps may result in PHMC not continuing to fund the PHL Pre-K slot and a provider not receiving payment. For your program calendar, you want to schedule a minimum of 180 days of service between September 1st and June 30th. Snow days or any scheduled cancellations need to be made up to ensure the full number of days. And providers must also adhere to state or city guidance around mandated closures related to COVID. For your daily schedule, there should be a minimum of 5 hours per day of developmentally appropriate instructional time. That should include 60 minutes of physical activity. What's not included is in those 5.5 hours is arrival and departure time and also nap time. And if there are any part of the PHL Pre-K day that occurs before 7:30 a.m. or after 4:30 p.m., a written request must be submitted to PHMC for approval by OCF prior to the classroom opening.
Okay, so moving into curriculum, this isn't new for most of you folks. As you know, the required PHL Pre-K curriculum is the creative curriculum, and we ask that you are implementing programming based on it. You do have supports that are available to you from both Spark and the School District of Philadelphia, depending on which contract entity you're under. If you do use a supplemental curriculum, creative curriculum still has to be your primary curriculum and in use for those 180 days of service. And please make sure that you're aligning that supplemental curriculum with the creative curriculum and responding to documented development needs of children in the classroom. Also, if you do use a supplemental curriculum, it has to be from the list mentioned here, the Octal list of curricular alignments to the 2014 Pennsylvania Learning Standards for early childhood. Again, nothing new. Make sure that you are conducting continuous child observation to inform child outcomes. We ask that these reflect all months of service that a child is in care, so hopefully not, November and May right before those checkpoints. And each domain of development as outlined in teaching strategies goals. Each child should have at minimum one documented observation in every dimension or objective per checkpoint time frame. So if you are unfamiliar with TSG, it's really worthwhile to sort of sink your teeth into the different dimensions and objectives. There are a lot. And to be able to fulfill this documentation requirement, it's best to start early and get a routine in and be consistent to be able to meet this goal. We also ask that you conduct a minimum of 2 family conferences so that you can discuss child progress and set educational goals, so that you can be working in concert with families to make sure that they understand what the outcomes are and what their children are doing. Also make sure that you record child progress using the Teaching Strategies Gold online data tool, and that will be reviewed by the intermediary twice per year, typically in November and May. Developmental screening. Again, nothing new here. The deadlines have all remained the same. We ask that you complete at least one developmental screening that reflects all domains of development for each child annually within 45 calendar days of the child's program start date. So if you have children that were enrolled in PHLpreK last year, you still have to do an ASQ or some other developmental screening for those children this year. And again, that's within 45 days of their program start date. We also ask that you share that information 14 days within completion of the screening. And that any child who has a concern identified get referred to ELWIN for assessment. Make sure you document that conversation within 14 days and document the referral within 7 days after that conversation with the family once you get the consent to refer, and make sure that that gets entered into childware. Of course, please rescreen per tool guidelines if the concern is identified. And also just in general, make sure that you're using the ASQ website. They have a really great tool called the age calculator that makes it really easy to figure out exactly which screener should apply to a child based on their birth date. Also make sure that children with an IEP, they are exempt from this requirement as long as there is a current IEP in the child's file in childware. And if there is a request for early childhood mental health services for a child with an IEP, it is possible that a request for an ASQ SE be done for that child. On the screen here, this is just an example way to visualize the timeline for developmental screening. So the majority of children will probably start in your program around September 6th or in that area. So that developmental screening has to be completed by the 20th. So just sort of tune into your brain here, like how you want to schedule that out with all the children that are enrolled in your program. And then the green calendar dates there that I highlighted November, so that November 2nd would be when you would have to have documented that conversation with the family about the results of the screening. And then if you get consent to refer and if a referral needs to be made, that second green date, November 9th, is when you would need to have that documented with ELWIN. So most of your children are starting around that first full week of September there. That means that all of the developmental screening work should be done by mid-November. So just in terms of planning and how you want to schedule that out, keep this sort of time frame in mind. If you're interested in getting a waiver for curriculum assessment or developmental screening tools, there is some criteria. You will need to be a participant in PHLpreK for at least a year. Any new program can appeal that, but they need to have a pretty significant justification in order to use a different tool. And they need to make sure that they're implementing the curriculum consistently. Waivers must be submitted to PHMC and be approved by OCF, and this is something that we will address in future communications what the process is for that. So on the slide here, we have those first three blue bullets. Those are where you can find lists of the different accepted either curriculum assessment or developmental screening tools. Providers with an approved waiver are still going to be responsible for getting PHLpreK children to meet those child outcome benchmarks, also covering the cost of any staff professional development, technical assistance, or coaching that's needed to implement the alternate material in the program. The waiver may also be rescinded if you are unable to maintain 100% compliance in meeting PHLpreK child outcomes benchmarks. Okay, so on the slide here, this is sort of the wordy version of this, but especially for returning folks, I want you to make sure you're tuning in for this because this is staff qualifications are very different this year. So the first section here refers to directors, owner operators of family childcare, and lead teachers and assistant teachers. So as you probably know, every childcare center location has to have a full-time director, of course, or an administrator, and that person has to have a minimum of a PA career pathway placement level B. So this is new. We're basing the staff qualifications based on the PA career pathway placement levels. And for a director, our minimum qualification is level B on the PA career pathway placement. The director must also, of course, meet all other DHS regulations. Each classroom must have a lead teacher, and that lead teacher must have a minimum of a PA career pathway placement level B. Owner operators of family childcare that act as a lead teacher also have to be level B. And every classroom that has more than 10 children, regardless of whether or not they're PHLpreK, so you may have 10 pre-K counts children and 2 PHLpreK children, but because there are more than 10 children in that classroom, they need to have an assistant teacher, and that assistant teacher needs to have a minimum PA career pathway placement level A. So in the next slide, we'll kind of see what that actually means. But the sort of simplified version is lead teachers and directors need to be level B on the career pathway, and assistant teachers need to be level A. And the next slide, we'll see what exactly that means. And for the school district, of course, any directors, administrators, lead teachers, assistant teachers, they have to meet the staff qualifications established for employees Of the school district, and staff at other school district contracted sites must meet qualifications for center director, lead teacher, and assistant teacher noted above. Okay, so this is what it actually means to be a level A or level B in the career pathway placement. On the left, we have a little table that just has the position type and the career pathway levels. And on the right, this is a snip from the career pathway, the PA Keys career pathway levels. And it's actually linked on the slide. You can get a copy of this document. There are some levels in between here. I think most of you are probably pretty familiar now. There's entry level, rising level A plus. So there are some different requirements, but in order to meet level A or level B, you have to complete one of the bulleted items. So someone qualifies for level A as an assistant teacher if they hold a current CDA, if they have a current school age credential, or if they have 9 early childhood education credits. That's different from last year because it used to be 6. So it's 9 early childhood education credits to be an assistant teacher. That's level A. Level B includes regionally accredited ECE focused ASB or AST. So those are their PRISM degrees. If that was conferred on or before June 30th of this year, so anybody who graduated from a PRISM on or before June 30th of this year and has that ASB or AST qualifies for level B and qualifies for a lead teacher, which is new. That's different this year. They also qualify if they have an associate's in early childhood education and an associate's or a bachelor's in a related field with 18 ECE credits, an associate's or bachelor's in an unrelated field with 30 ECE credits, or an elementary ed degree with 12 ECE credits. In order to be in one of these levels, PHMC, Spark, the school district, we are not the people who determine where you are in the career pathway level placement. That happens with the PA Key and in the PD registry. So those are the folks who need to see your credentials, your transcripts, your diplomas, all that information. They're the ones who make the determination about where you fall in the PA career pathway placement here. And then of course, substitutes classes need to be staffed by full-time staff. All substitutes have to meet the credentials for the position that they are filling. And any program that uses a substitute for more than 90 days is going to need to develop a quality improvement plan to address staff recruitment and plan for strategies to make sure that they can ensure that they have qualified staff available. And as many of you know, providers will need to document staff credentials, like I mentioned, in the professional development registry. All staff will need to acquire and maintain that verified career pathway level. Again, that's what we're using to determine staff qualifications. The credentials, again, are read by and interpreted by the folks at the PD registry. Any new hire has to complete their profile and have a verified career pathway level within 45 days of hire. So that level has to be there within 45 days. So make sure that your staff are not just submitting their credentials 45 days in. They need to have that ready to go and in process by this time. And I think, as most of you know, you also have to keep checking in on that profile and renewing it once a year. So if it becomes expired, usually if there's no change, then you just have to confirm that there's no change. And I think the registry just kind of uses that to make sure that if you do have an update, that you report it. So you took more classes or you had to renew your CDA, that you are in touch with the PD registry to make sure that that information stays current. Okay, so temporary waivers. The process for applying for a lead teacher waiver is going to be different this year. We haven't refined it completely, so please, if you're curious about the lead teacher waiver process, hold on. We will give you more information as we get into the school year. But a lead teacher with a degree who does not meet level B or higher may qualify for a waiver to fill the position of PHLpreK lead teacher for the program year. So again, a lead teacher who has a degree and doesn't meet level B or higher may qualify for a waiver. So if they don't have a degree, they might not be able to get to that lead teacher waiver. The waiver also applies to lead teacher position for family childcare in the case where the family childcare owner operator does not serve as the full-time lead teacher. For the temporary waiver for assistant teachers, this hasn't changed much. Any individual who does not meet the minimum PHLpreK requirement for level A for assistant teachers can submit a waiver for consideration if they meet the career pathway rising level A. So they have to already be in the registry and be working on stuff to meet that level A. They can document action towards meeting the education requirements. So that's that CDA, the 9 ECE credits, and they participate in Tier 3 coaching supports.
Okay, so providers need to comply with the city's 21st century minimum wage benefit for PHL pre-K staff. This will increase to $15 this year and applies only to staff directly related to PHL pre-K. Exemptions include agencies with 5 or fewer employees, nonprofits with contract awards less than $100,000. And if you're unable to meet the requirement, you may request a temporary waiver, and that's done directly to the city. The form on the right-hand side was shared as part of the enrollment packet. This should be shared with families to support access to full day, full year services if needed. You should also be maintaining your child care works contract for before and after care. It's important to ensure that you have a written agreement with families that outlines the services to be provided, any fees associated with services outside of PHL pre-K, and really just the expectations for families. There's a DHS template that can be found here, and we're sharing a list of what the form must include for reference, so you can go back and take a look if needed. Providers should have an inclusion policy in your family and staff handbook that addresses enrolling children with special needs, providing direct supports through your program and through Elwyn, staff supports, and procedures for referral. Providers should not deny enrollment or waitlist opportunities to any family eligible for PHL pre-K. Providers are not permitted to suspend or expel a child. You'll need to submit your suspension and expulsion policy as an exhibit with your contract, which we'll talk about in the next session of this presentation. If folks need support in developing your policies, Sparks Quality Support Center can assist you, and we'll talk about some specifics there as well. We're also sharing here the Octal definitions of suspension and expulsion as a reference. You can take a look at these too if needed. Providers need to verify that at least one health assessment is not over a year old, and that should be kept in the child's file. Providers should participate in initiatives identified by OCS to make sure children have access to health screenings, and children should not be denied access to PHL pre-K or be discharged if these screenings are not up to date. You should be providing nutritious meals and snacks every day, adhere to age-appropriate nutritional requirements like CACFP. We strongly encourage participation in CACFP. I know many of you are already in it, but if needed, there's some links here to get to finding more information as well. You should also be familiar with the Philadelphia Nutrition Standards for Early Care and Education. That's linked here. Standards around physical activity, screen time, and offering clean, safe water remain the same. That's offering 60 to 90 minutes of physical activity, limiting screen time to 30 minutes or less per week for ages 2 and older. And on the next slide, providing clean, safe drinking water throughout all times of the day. Differences here are related to water testing and fried foods. So any childcare facility with 13 or more children must test all potable water outlets for lead and submit results to the Department of Public Health. There's a link here to read more about the city requirement. The state also launched a program to provide free water testing and expert support to childcare facilities. So we've linked it there. We've linked that program there so you can check it out and find more resources. An optional item is also to develop strategies to ensure that fried foods are not offered more than 2 times per week.
Okay, so family partnerships. Just make sure that you're communicating regularly with families and caregivers and using various methods to do this. Mostly, and I'm sure folks have systems in place for doing this, but really what you want to do is create a system that also includes reporting on child progress and gets feedback from the family, and use languages and platforms that families can readily access. If you're using something like Brightwheel and no one ever logs into it, maybe it would be better if you just had a bulletin board, or ask parents what they want it to do. Also providing ways for parents and families to help in planning events, trainings, or workshops where applicable at your site. Also make sure that you have a family grievance policy that outlines processes to address concerns, and that gets shared at the family handbook. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the next couple of slides. And work with OCF to deploy resource materials to PHL pre-K families throughout the program year and support the distribution and completion of that year-end PHL pre-K family satisfaction survey. So for family grievances, concerns of PHL pre-K enrolled families are reported directly to the intermediary, directly to the intermediary OCF will be addressed in a fair and consistent manner that aligns with regulatory standards, best practices, and PHL pre-K mission. A member of the PHL pre-K intermediary team will record the grievance, and every effort will be made to address concerns collaboratively. So we're not just going to listen to one side, we're going to try and get as many sides as possible. If an issue or concern can't be resolved for the family informally through something like policy or protocol clarification, the intermediary team will follow up directly with the provider and the assigned contract entity to identify a resolution. If the grievance results from a provider contract noncompliance, then we'll move to something like a quality improvement plan or corrective action, depending on the severity. And that'll be issued to outline action steps for the provider to resolve the grievance and then also prevent future noncompliance. So kindergarten transition, again, that's one of those OCF main missions and goals for PHL pre-K. All children who turn 5 by the age requirements established by the school district for the following year. We want them to be registered and ready to go for kindergarten. So the steps that we lay out to help make sure that that can happen, and so that families can make the best choices for them and their children, are to ensure that that transition plan is created within 60 days of the child's entry date. That transition meeting is held with families to discuss different options by January 1st. This includes registration for catchment and out of catchment registration deadlines. We want families to be able to get ahead of the game so that they understand all of the options that are available to them. OCF is also currently working to develop resources to share with families about these options, because I think it gets a little complicated because of all the different kinds of due dates. We want folks, both you and families, to have a clear understanding of what options are there. The registration status in school for each child also should be in childware by May 31st. Of course, a big part of monitoring is going to be the document upload process, and it supports monitoring and contract activities at the child level for things like enrollment verification documents, things like health assessments, developmental screenings. Those IEPs really need to be in childware where applicable and current. And also, as you'll learn when we go through the next part of the training, contract exhibits will also need to get uploaded and saved into childware as well. We ask that you're engaging in the project and continuous improvement of the system. So what this means is that you're attending meetings and trainings. This will help ensure that you're in compliance with deliverables and remain current on policies, procedures, information. We said a couple of times in this presentation about a few things that are going to be changed or updated. For example, that lead teacher waiver, information about remote learning waivers. And so that's why we need folks to be up to date and attending meetings, also reading the newsletter. Attend meetings convened by OCF for designees, and then applicable trainings, things like peer learning circles, childware trainings, and then curriculum and outcomes assessment trainings are required for any lead teachers or administrators who have not previously taken the training. And of course, as a contracted provider, you're expected to comply with all monitoring and reporting requests that are made by PHMC, OCF, the respective contract entity, and any other organization that's engaged by PHMC or OCF for the purpose of reporting on the PHL pre-K program. So what this means is that we just want to be able to know what's happening in PHL pre-K and be able to talk about it and share about it. Participate in quality improvement activities when recommended by OCF or its designee, and participate in the data collection and evaluation activities. Many of you are probably already familiar with the NEAR process and the NEAR evaluators, and in the PHL pre-K network, and then quality supports as recommended or directed by OCF or designees. Invoicing. Many of you, this hasn't really changed So you may begin expending anticipated funds now, July 2022. However, keep in mind that you will not receive payment until that won't be dispersed until after the first month of service. So that won't be dispersed until October. The current rate for slot reimbursement per month per attended child is $875. An approved and enrolled child will need to have attended at least one day in that month, and the invoice can never exceed the total slot allocation. Invoices are submitted across 10 months, so from October to July by the 10th of the month following the month of service. So if you're invoicing for September, you need to have that invoice submitted by October 10th. The intermediary is notified immediately of any discrepancies, and they must be corrected prior to invoice submission. So that has to do with enrollment verification and approval and attendance records. School district providers, of course, will be paid based on terms outlined in their provider agreement with the school district. Payment to providers will be made within 21 days following approval of an invoice. Eligibility verification will occur within 60 days of enrollment. So if any child is found to be actually ineligible, then the recoup for that, the payment for that child will occur for payments for ineligible enrollments after that verification occurs. In this contract year, so in FY23 for September and October, invoicing and payments are based on slot allocation. So first 2 months, it's based on slot allocation. The first invoicing period will be October 1st to the 10th. So what that means is that if you were awarded 20 slots, and you have 10 children enrolled in September, then you can still invoice for 20 children because it's based on allocation. If you still have 10 children enrolled in November, then you will be paid for, and they attend, then you will be paid for 10 children who are enrolled and attended in November. It changes then. So again, September and October, you will be paid based on your allocation, and then starting in November, you will be paid based on approved enrollments and attendance.
So on to fiscal expectations. So there are several levels of review that occur. As many of you all know, we are trying to coordinate training with OCF and PHMC fiscal department around these fiscal expectations. So that's another item that's coming soon. But as a review, desk reviews, for PHMC will perform desk reviews for a 10% randomly selected sample of providers with annual PHLpreK revenue below $300,000, or providers with fiscal concerns identified by OCF or PHMC. So the desk review is going to verify adherence to PHLpreK billing and fiscal reporting guidelines. These reviews are going to be announced, and PHMC may recommend corrective action based on findings. All providers will need to submit mid-year expense reviews. There's no change here. And then end-of-year expense reports. PHMC will request year-end expense reports for all providers with FY23 PHLpreK revenue below $300,000 that are not selected for the desk review sample. And then PHMC may also implement additional fiscal monitoring based on those findings. For those that need external reviews, the thresholds are higher than they were last year. This is in response to concerns we heard from providers around the cost of these reviews. So for providers with $300,000 to below $500,000 in PHLpreK revenue, you'll need to have an independent auditor conduct an agreed upon procedure, or an AUP, in accordance with the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. So for providers with $500,000 or more now in PHLpreK revenue, you'll need to do the external audit in accordance with generally accepted government auditing standards or a yellow book audit. And those with $750,000 in federal funding will require a federal single audit. These external reviews should separately break out PHLpreK funding and expenditures during each program year. That is part of the provider's fiscal year. So if your fiscal year ends on December 30th, you want to make sure you include January to June of the prior PHLpreK fiscal year, and then July to December periods. As applicable, the examination procedure or audit must encompass the provider's total operation, and include a separate schedule for the PHL pre-K agreement. And that discloses all differences between receipts and expenditures under that agreement and any prior agreement for which the provider received PHL pre-K funding during its fiscal year. Providers who need to complete the external review may request an extension. Well, first you need to complete the external review 3 months from close of the books of your fiscal year. You need to submit an executive summary or attestation form as documentation of compliance with this requirement. That's going to be submitted annually by October 30th of the following program year. And extensions may be requested. One-time extensions to PHMC no later than 2 months following the close of your fiscal year. You can submit for a 90-day one-time extension. It may be granted if the request includes an engagement letter from your auditor, so we know your external review is happening. 30-day, or you can request a 30-day one-time extension. It may be granted if the request does not include an engagement letter from an auditor. And for consideration for an extension, a compelling reason must be provided. You need to maintain good standing as a vendor with the City of Philadelphia. Maintain full tax. You need to fulfill all tax obligations to the city, state, and federal. For those that still need to resolve city tax compliance and that received a conditional award, the deadline again is August 1st. You all know who you are. If you have any trouble getting a response from revenue, if you reached out by email, had PHL pre-K in that title, please let us know by emailing the PHL pre-K inbox. You also need to adhere to City of Philadelphia general provisions. That's an attachment to the contract. There are some modifications as OCF wanted these to align with DHS subcontractors. So all providers should really review those, but we wanted to specifically call out a change to insurance for those providing services to students in the school district of Philadelphia or those located in the school district facilities. And we have an exhibit checklist we'll share at the end of this meeting that has a little bit more information on that.
So on the screen, we have compliance definitions. I'm not going to read them to you, but these are just here for your reference and illustrate the levels of written notification if a compliance concern is identified. And it ranges from quality improvement plan all the way to a notice of termination, which we'll actually get into a little more detail here next. So termination may occur the following may result in a termination. Failure to maintain DHS or PDE license in good standing, failure to procure and maintain applicable insurance coverages, unresolved noncompliance with a notice of default, egregious areas of noncompliance, including but not limited to noncompliance jeopardizing the health and safety of children enrolled, preventing or restricting access to PHL pre-K services, or creating undue hardship for families or enrolled PHL pre-K children, compromising PHL pre-K program integrity and public message, or with the potential to impact the manner and accuracy of payment for PHL pre-K service. If terminated, a provider may be ineligible to reapply until at least 1 year from the effective date of termination has passed, and then only in the active RFQ cycle. So you wouldn't be eligible to apply as a renewal provider at that time. You can appeal a notice of default, which is the step before termination. PHL pre-K provider may submit a written appeal following the notice of default to the contract entity, OCF, and the intermediary. That has to be sent within 10 business days of receipt of the non-compliance notification, and it has to include supporting documentation demonstrating required compliance. You have to back up whatever it is that you are arguing or trying to say in your appeal response. OCF, PHMC, and the contract entity, where appropriate, will review and respond to the written appeal within 20 business days. Final written decision from OCF will be binding. If the letter of appeal is submitted without any kind of written compliance documentation, information, or argument, the notice of default or slot reallocation and timeline will stand. And hopefully too, the Quality Support Center will provide responsive interventions to remediate deficiencies before it gets to this point. Okay, so we're doing pretty well on time. So we're gonna do a big pause for questions. And again, we might not get to every single question that's in the question box here, but we will be completing a written version of questions so that we can make sure that everybody gets the response that they need. So Allison, we have a couple of questions about developmental screening that you might be able to help us out with. One of them is, well, actually, this is a slightly different one. So for ASQ, if we have children attending in a summer program, can we begin working on completion of the ASQ? And then there's part two, is there going to be PD offered for ASQ to meet the Keystone Stars updated standard of PD by the vendor?
Right. Great. Thanks, Kate. So yes, there's training. We are confirming the dates for August, September, and October. Our staff will most likely do all of those this year. So they will be on our Knowledge Center shortly. And the second question, if a child is going to be in Philly Pre-K in the fall, I don't want to answer that question because I don't honestly want to mislead you. So I would like to get back to you on that question.
Thanks.
Kate, can I chime in on the
Yep,
question about
yep.
the child who's enrolled in the summer and the ASQ? Right. Yeah, as long as it's within the 45 days of when the child enrolls for the PHL Pre-K program, so it could be a little bit before. Some providers have done the ASQ as sort of a part of the enrollment process. So we would accept that if it was to be in August.
Thank you. Okay, next is, what does it mean for staff must be full-time? Do staff have to work for 40 hours, or do they only work for the hours of the program around 30 hours a week? I think that's in reference to the full-time staff, rather that we require full-time staff working in PHL Pre-K programming. So I don't think PHL Pre-K can require that the hours that your staff work, especially if it's outside of our requirements for the schedule. But what we mean by that is that staff person should be there full-time for PHL Pre-K program hours. So depending on what your daily schedule is and what that looks like, we don't really know how many hours a week that will be for your staff, and also depending on your hours of operation. But that staff person should be fully employed for at least that, are working for the PHL Pre-K hours of operation. And there's another question here about minimum amount of staff required for minimum wage. I forget the number. Carrie, do you remember what the number was?
I think it was 5. We go back. 5 or fewer employees. But you also want to make sure that you're looking at that city compliance, the 21st century minimum wage benefit definitions. Or
Yeah,
links to
Angelina,
the city articles.
yeah, Angelina, I can send that to you too if you want to, and like try and zero in on exactly what it is. If you do need to submit a waiver, you can do that directly with the city. And I see a question about the difference between federal single audit and yellow book audit and the differences between them. Honestly, that is more of a CPA question, exactly what the differences are. You're going to want to speak with your accountant about what the requirements are for that. But do recommend that you are ahead of it now if you think that you have a contract allocation or award that's going to get you into one of those review categories. And just a note about the changes. So the 300,000 mark, that is where we start asking for the AUP. That starts now with funds that you are expending this month, next month, and that you will be receiving in October. So if you are a returning PHL Pre-K provider and you are in that $100,000 to $300,000 range, or $100,000 to $299,000 range, the old applications or the old categories still apply to you. So in the school year that just closed, you will still be required to submit that AUP. And it changed for the funds that you will be receiving in the future, and expending in the future. Tanya, your question about whether or not you can put children in childwear now, yes, please do. please get those enrollments in so we can get them approved. But I think that's it. We're a quiet group today.
Great. Okay, great. We can move on to the next section, which is preparing for contracting. Now that we've got through all the deliverables. So in preparation for contracting, you'll need to submit these exhibits. They're the same as last year, but they may have some updates to templates or samples. So we'll go through, this is due, these are all the contract exhibits are due August 5th. And I'll go down the list. You'll need to have the daily schedule, program calendar, attendance policy. We have enrollment waitlist policy, a grievance policy, suspension and expulsion policy, kindergarten transition plan template. Also, you'll need, on the next slide, we'll see line item budget, a copy of your valid DHS license or PD license, and your copy of your insurance documentation. You need to show evidence of insurance must be submitted to your contract entity prior to start. Obtaining and maintaining insurance coverage is applicable, and you may request attestations if certain coverages are not needed. So here you're going to see some insight into the review process. So as of August 5th, you all will upload your exhibits in Childware. PHMC is going to track submission of those exhibits and receipt of them. The review of exhibits will be done by PHMC and Spark staff. So we want to let you know this because one of our staff may be following up with you to request revisions. So PHMC is going to review the program calendar, the daily schedule, attendance, enrollment, and waitlist policies, a line item budget, your DHS license, and certificate of insurance. Spark is going to review the program grievance policy, suspension expulsion policy, and then also the kindergarten transition plan. So when all those are completed, PHMC conforms the contracts and then send that out to providers. We'll go through some tips on completing exhibits. For all you returning providers, make sure you're using the correct program year, that's FY23. Make sure that's referenced in titles or headings. So make sure you're not taking last year's FY22 documents and just submitting them. We'll know the difference. Make sure you're using the appropriate program name. It's PHLpreK, not anything like Philly Pre-K or anything that has a hyphen in it. Make sure you're using the correct title for the city. It's the Office of Children and Families, not the old name for that department, the Mayor's Office of Education. And make sure when you're submitting your DHS license that it's not expired. In terms of your daily schedule, make sure you're putting 5 hours per day of developmentally appropriate time. That includes meals, transitions, and 60 minutes of active play. On the next slide, you'll see just like a sample of what that may look like. It's 5.5 hours are included here, and you'll see like the nap time. It's included in the schedule, but is not included in the 5.5 hours.
Okay, so on the screen here, we have a sample of a calendar, a couple things that we want you to make sure that are on that calendar include holidays. So make sure that you highlight where those are going to happen. Holidays, scheduled closures, PD, where the program won't be operating full day. Make sure you have that end of program date on there, beginning of program date, closings, holidays. Also make sure that you're including the total number of days of service there. We require 180 minimum that are offered throughout the year, but because things happen, then we would really recommend that you schedule more than that, just so that you have a couple in your back pocket if you need to close for any unexpected reason. Also that you count up the days of service per month so that you can figure out quickly how much and when programming is happening. So on the screen here, we have a snip of a sample attendance policy that's going to be in your checklist that you can reference. We want to make sure that the policy definitely references and adheres to CDC, OCDEL, city, and caring for our children guidance that relates to health-related exclusions. So that speaks to COVID-19, but also other infectious diseases. A child who is absent for 30 days or more that doesn't have prior approval from the program director and the intermediary may be discharged and placed on the wait list if interested, and will be able to re-enroll if a slot becomes available. Also that it addresses chronic or extended absences, excused or unexcused, and that they will be reviewed by OCF and PHMC, and that'll occur on a case-by-case basis to determine if a child should be discharged after 30 days. Again, here we have a snip of a sample enrollment waitlist policy. Make sure that it clearly identifies that PHLpreK is a free program. It's possible that you have other programs, maybe before and after care, summer care, et cetera, that have fees associated with them, but it has to be clear in this policy that PHLpreK itself and the services in it are free. Include time and procedures for notification of enrollment to parent or guardian within 24 hours of the enrollment approval. And include time frame for child to start the program, which has to be within 7 days of that approval. The grievance policy. So this is really sort of the rules of engagement between families and providers. And this is kind of the way that you can sort of set the stage if there is an issue so that everybody knows what to expect from each other and they don't get, it helps to prevent escalation if there is a problem. So if in your grievance policy, make sure that you include steps that you want families to follow to resolve issues or concerns so they know where to go or what to do if they have a problem. Identify the contact person that will receive grievances from families and have a backup just in case that person is the source of the problem. Communication method for families to document their grievances. It's possible that you might only want to receive those in writing just for everybody's, to have the documentation on it, but make sure that families know that so they know how to submit that too. Do you want it in an email? Do you want it written down? Do you have a comment box or something? What's the process for that? A timeline that'll be used to resolve grievances so families know when they can expect a response from you. If you've told them that you'll get back to them in a week, then they will know that that's what they can expect. Strategies you'll use to ensure confidentiality of families filing grievance. You don't want other families in each other's business, that kind of thing. And the strategies that you'll use to ensure that all families that file a grievance will be treated with fairness. So on the screen we have some sort of poor or sent back language that was in a suspension and expulsion policy. Really what we want to get across here is that children cannot be suspended or expelled without approval from the intermediary. And suspension and expulsion includes things like removing a child from the classroom and putting them in an office or sending them home early at the earlier than the end of the school day because of a behavioral challenge. You have to get in touch with the intermediary and get support when needed for that. I'm not going to read it to you, but we have some sample policy language here that was really excellent on the screen. You can reference back to this in the slides if you want, but it refers to sort of progressive disciplinary practices. There are also a lot of really excellent resources available for developing suspension and expulsion policies. They're linked here on the slide. They come from OCDEL. There's the guidelines to support implementation of OCDEL announcement on suspension and expulsion development policy. Developing suspension and expulsion policy, that's a nice, I think it's like a 2-pager, and promoting inclusion and reducing expulsion and suspension. The real aim there, again, is about inclusion and making sure that children can remain in programs.
So there's a sample kindergarten transition plan to use as a guide in developing your own template. There's also like a blank template for you to write in all those activities. But your plan should include the date the plan was created, the child's name, your parent or guardian, and your staff completing the plan. Please include all people responsible for activities, target dates, and completion dates for those tasks. And remember to include the required deadlines and childcare data entry dates. And you can see the sample for that plays that out. Your line item budget, make sure your total award, your total budget amount at the top matches your total budget at the bottom. If your amount is over or under the range, you're going to need to include a justification there, and that's that circle on the right. Make sure you're submitting also the correct FY23 template. There's one for centers and one for families. And if you're a group and you need to know which one you should submit, please reach out to your provider service specialist. For insurance, your coverage should include general liability, workers' compensation, auto insurance for owned, non-owned, and hired vehicles, professional liability insurance, fidelity bond or criminal insurance, and you should include on your insurance the City of Philadelphia or Public Health Management Corporation. For those providing services to students in the School District of Philadelphia or those located in school district facilities, you need to put the School District of Philadelphia on your insurance as well. We have an exhibit checklist we'll share at the end of this that has more information on that. But just make sure your insurance, you have crime and professional liability insurance, you list PHMC and OCF, and then the school district is applicable. Make sure your insurance has not expired, especially workers' compensation. We saw that a lot last year. Make sure you have adequate coverage for each required insurance component. And you need to list each location on the insurance document if coverage is for a legal entity. Okay, so you should work with your insurance agent to make sure your coverage matches what's in Article 7, and that's going to be linked in that checklist. We don't need your full policy either, just upload your insurance certificate. For fiscal forms for direct deposit, this is mainly going to be for new providers, but just in case you have any changes that you want to make, you're going to need to submit these forms: ACH credit authorization form, copy of avoided check, subcontractor questionnaire, and your W-9 form. Here you'll find the links to the contracts exhibit checklist and a guide for contracts exhibits. I think Kate is dropping them in the chat now. You should download these right away and get started because we have on the next slide all the next steps that about the deadlines you'll need to meet. So if we can go to the next slide when Kate has a chance.
Yes, sorry, trying to drop.
No, I'm sure you're dropping in the link.
Yeah.
No, I'm sure you're dropping in the link. So the next steps, your remote learning waiver, all providers need to complete that. It's due August 5th. And again, we're going to follow up with communications around that about how to submit it. Your curriculum assessment and developmental screening waivers are due that same time, August 5th. And we'll bundle these communications together. All contract exhibits are going to be due August 5th, and you need to upload those into Childware. And just as a reminder, please contact your update your contact information. That's ongoing if contacts change, and you can link to how to do that on this slide here. Again, PHMC is going to be the first point of contact around your contract deliverables, and your provider service specialist is there to help and support you. They're there to answer any questions and get clarity on contract exhibits, particularly those that we are reviewing. There's a list there, but I won't go through them. They are holding office hours. Here are the Zoom links on the right-hand side. You can also find these in the provider update newsletter that's sent out weekly, so you can join directly there. On the next slide, Allison, do you want to go through this slide about Spark supports?
Sure. So we have some trainings coming up. All of our trainings are up on our Knowledge Center events calendar. And we have suspension and expulsion training coming up in August, as indicated on the screen. And this will be talking about the legal ramifications of suspension and expulsion, and talking about what needs to be included in a policy and procedure. It should be informative and helpful. And then over the next month, You will see more and more events going onto our events calendar. And you are always welcome to reach out to our coaches and email us if you have questions in the meantime.
Thanks, Allison. And so the last thing we wanted to point out is you need to upload, again, your documents in Childware. For any assistance on how to upload documents, we have a tip sheet linked here. It's also in that checklist, so you can find it there. If you do have any questions, Childware staff are holding summer office hours. That's going to start on July 21st and run through September 1st. And that's going to be on Thursdays from 2 to 4:30. So there's a link here, and then there's also that's also in the provider update newsletter. So I think that rounds out our presentation for today. Kate, do we have any more questions that we want to get to?
Yeah, we have a couple. There's a question about whether or not there will be a deliverable due dates handout. Jess, I think you might be mentioning that, oh gosh, the dot chart. Once that's completed, I think that's going to be available on the Knowledge Center. I know we're working on it.
It's going to be posted on the Knowledge Center. I believe it will also come out with your contract as well, but we'll make sure it's available.
Yes, we can put it on the Knowledge Center.
Yeah, so that'll be made available. We'll probably put it in the newsletter too. Let's see, we have a question about coaching, actually. When will our new coaches reach out, and how often will Spark coaches provide support to schools?
Thanks for asking that question. So our caseloads are being finalized and will be available to all coaches by next Thursday. At that point, the coaches will begin reaching out to their providers. However, it doesn't mean that you can't reach out between now and next Thursday. The best way to do that is to go through our Knowledge Center and request that a coach contact you. We are ready and eager to support in any way we can. And so just reach out.
Thanks, Allison. There's a question about social emotional curriculum kits.
I can answer that too.
Yeah, the second step.
Yep, second step is going to be available. We are working on delivery of those kits. I would say they will definitely be delivered by the start of the school year. We will also be providing ongoing training and support with implementation of second step. Your coaches will be taking training, so they'll be familiar with the kit. And so if you need anything in the meantime, certainly reach out.
Great, okay. And then there's a question about a link to the Knowledge Center. Nicole, I'll drop that in my response to you, but I will put it in the chat because I think we have some time. Allison, if you are game to do a little tour of this.
Sure.
Okay. Let me know when you're ready and I'll make you a presenter.
Okie doke, I am ready.
Great.
Allison, while you're pulling that up, looks like we have another question about dates for TSG and creative curriculum trainings.
Great. Yes, so we are about to, they will be all announced. All the trainings for TSG are going to be announced in this coming month's August newsletter. And all of the dates and registration links will be on our Knowledge Center. Probably by the end of next week, if they're not before that. Again, if you want to know what those dates are, you can certainly reach out to me directly, and I'll be happy to just tell you what dates they are and the times. And then the registration links will be available shortly. So can everybody see my screen now? Great, great. So here is our Spark website. So there's a variety of things to just point out to you all. as you look at this. So up on the right-hand corner is our help desk phone number. This is really easy. You just call. Nicole is our help desk coordinator, and she will answer your calls and she will respond to you with whatever you need help with. Down on the right-hand side, there's a chat with the expert. You can click on the chat with the expert and talk directly to Nicole again. There's a variety of ways to connect with us. So please feel free to use those features. There's also several other things on the website that are maybe helpful to you, but I'm going to show you specifically the Knowledge Center and where you can look at the events calendar. And your coach, when you connect with your coach, can certainly travel and through it with you as well and help you navigate it. So to begin with, this Knowledge Center has a variety of features that probably would be really helpful to you as you begin to navigate. First off, as you can see up on the right-hand corner, there is another opportunity for you to chat with somebody. That is Nicole, and she is ready and excited to have people talk with her. And then the rest of this is important too, because you can literally search a topic, any kind of topic, and you will get the list of all the resources that we have that has any relevance to observations, for example. And those are every article that we have available currently. The other thing that I want to show you on this Knowledge Center is that on the right-hand side, again, there's another way to contact us, but there's also a way to submit a resource. So if you think you have a really important and great resource around observations or any other topic that's related to ECE, certainly feel free to upload it. We always like people's input. The other things that I want to quickly show you is these quick links. You get connected to all the newsletters and all the latest information for all of these. You just click and they come up. So like if we click on the the OCF newsletter, you get a quick link to all the newsletters. So if you forget and lose it in your email, like I do sometimes, you can come here and you can easily find it. The other thing that I wanted to show you is these featured topics. Right now, these are sort of hot topics. That's kind of how we look at them. So if you have specific questions about any of them, you would just click in the box. So like for the Phil Pre-K resources, and this is where we'll have all the resources too that some of Kate and Carrie shared with us today. But there's also a ton of other resources here that might be helpful to you as you begin to start your school year. The other thing that I wanted to share with you is this events calendar. Up on the top, there's another menu. Click on the events calendar. Right now, these are just color legends. They are not clickable links. We are working on that. And so for now, what the feature that I want to share with you is if you are eager to sign up for any trainings that we have on our calendar, this will be filled out for the entire year by the time you start school. But for now, the ones that are on here, all you do is literally click on the link. It'll tell you the times that it's being offered, and there's a registration link. It also includes a brief description of what we're offering, as well as who the targeted audience is. So, you know, take a look at this. You may not want to send your teachers to something that says directors or administrators because it might be not as relevant to them, or vice versa. Of course, we welcome anybody to attend these trainings. There's we will not, not accept you to come into the training. Just one of you will be aware. And that's literally it. You can also do the search and find a training if you're looking for a specific training. So we will have the ASQ, TSG trainings up on this calendar shortly, and you could really just search for that, and those dates and times would come up for you. And that's it. Is there any questions about that I can answer?
I don't think so. We have a request from someone to make sure that the Knowledge Center gets linked into the PHLpreK newsletter. No problem. I also recommend to folks to just bookmark it in your browser so that you can just grab it when you need it. Oh, there's a question from Beautiful Beginnings, a question about staff who can attend professional development, probably from you folks at Spark. Is that just available for PHLpreK staff, or is it available for all staff at the site?
We will not turn anyone away. That we kind of are anticipating that people, once they discover that there's these resources, we won't turn people away. It may be just a little bit more complicated to get you a certificate, but we're working on that too. So there is no harm in you guys signing up who you need to sign up.
Great.
And it's free for Philly pre-K providers. Okay, so you know.
So does that mean that does that mean that staff that are at a site but aren't PHLpreK staff would have to pay?
Nope.
Or...
Nope.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thanks, Allison.
You're welcome.
So that concludes our presentation today. Please make sure you are following up with those next steps, downloading the exhibit checklist, and also those guidelines and getting started right away. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to, of course, your provider specialist to help and get clarification. So thanks all for joining today.
Thanks, folks.